So hi everyone, and thank you for taking the time to stay late in the day and join my session. Appreciate it. So very excited to be talking to you today about this topic. A little bit about myself. So my name is Eyal. I'm the field CTO at a company called DAS. I've been in the industry for around 12 years now, both as a practitioner, as a security engineer, and also as a manager. And I was lucky enough to join the founding team of DAS and really work with a lot of amazing security teams and individuals to learn about this space and together really build a solution to help us all in our day-to-day challenges. And the talk today is about, I want to share with you all the lessons that I've learned and really what is this space that's called ASPM. So it's intimate, so we can kind of do a show of hands. So how many of you have heard about what an ASPM is? All right, that's good. That's a good start. Great. Yeah, so hopefully I'll be able to help you kind of learn a bit more about what exactly it means, how it can help us tackle some of the day-to-day challenges that we're seeing. And since you've all heard of it, maybe you're also familiar with the, I'm not a big fan of Gartner categories, but obviously that's one of those. And Gartner is kind of projecting that organizations all are going to have an ASPM, or 40% of them are going to have an ASPM by 2025. Maybe you kind of believe those projections, maybe you don't, but I think it's very important that we really understand what stands behind it and whether we should be interested in it or maybe not. So as security practitioners, we're all very trained to be critical thinkers and always kind of really think deeply and judge what we're seeing. So I think the first thing you should ask yourselves every time you're introduced as a new category, a new domain is, why do I need it and why do I need it now? What has changed? And especially what has changed about application security in the modern cloud era, right? So ASPM is really about the intersection between application security and cloud security. And also, what's wrong with what I already have? Why should I be interested in kind of new and interesting tech? Maybe what I have already is working. And so I think as we look into ASPM, it's important to note that application security has been a profession, a very age-old profession. It's been out there for many, many years. And what I'm about to kind of share today and some of the lessons we've learned is that it hasn't evolved enough in the cloud area, in the changes that the cloud environment has brought into our world. Application security has not evolved enough. And also from the cloud security perspective, us as cloud security practitioners, we're very impacted by how well the application security of our organization is. If our application security is doing great, then we'll see less risk in our cloud environment. We'll see less bad workloads reaching our environment. And actually, there is quite of a blur between what we would consider your classic application security and what you might consider cloud security. So that's kind of what I wanted to share today. And actually, again, with a show of hands, how many of you would categorize yourselves as cloud security practitioners? Would you say? All right, great. Any application security practitioners in the crowd? All right, great, so good intersection. So let's kind of dive one step deeper into some of the changes that I think, well, most of you are familiar, but I think pointing our fingers on those to understand some of the trends that are happening that really impact this intersection of cloud and application. So first of all, code is becoming a major part of every organization. Even if you're not part of a software company, even if your product that your company is building is not pure software, there is still probably some code, some developers in-house, even for the companies that are really as far away as you can imagine from software, you start seeing a lot more investment in there. So this is starting to become a big part of every organization and obviously the security program of every organization. And some of the key changes that we're seeing is, first of all, DevOps obviously is a massive trend in the last couple of years. And I think from the security perspective, the biggest change that we're seeing is that now as security practitioners, we don't necessarily own and are responsible for every resource that's being created, every new infrastructure. If back in the days we would control every VM or every machine that's being created, now the shift of power has moved to the side of our developers or of our development organizations. And this shift of balance kind of changes how we want to manage security, how we want to handle our operations. So that's one thing we're seeing. Another thing, which is obviously another major trend that's rising, is the growth of configuration in our code. Things that we would never have considered to be even remotely related to code are now very much driven by code. So if we have classic infrastructure issues, network issues that used to be very classic things that we would use routers or switches to configure, now everything has become code-related, and things that we would consider infrastructure are now actually code issues. Obviously, the next one is that the cloud has brought a massive growth in scale. We're now having to handle a massive amount of resources, massive amount of risk that is being introduced, being spun up, spun down. You know, cloud is very, very dynamic and ephemeral. And lastly, as I've mentioned, there's a blur between what used to be your classic application security and what was considered to be your classic infrastructure security or cloud. It is all starting to merge a little bit, and I think this is where we're going to start seeing some of the challenges that the industry is facing. So, there we go. So just a couple of numbers I've gathered to kind of help us understand the magnitude of the challenge that we're facing as an industry. So first of all, one of the really interesting data points is that 92% of the organizations in this survey, and you can share the sources later, experienced a breach that was actually caused through internally developed applications. So it was through some code or some app that was built internally that led to a breach. Another amazing, pretty bad but still amazing data point is how long it takes to remediate and to fix application security issues that are well known, that there's a patch out there, everybody knows what we need to do, but the average time it takes is 271 days from another survey. And as you can imagine, with the growing sophistication of attackers, that number is way too long, and they are able to exploit and use those vulnerabilities way faster and cause a breach. So the gap between how fast we're fixing versus how fast attackers are exploiting is just growing. Another amazing data point is the sheer imbalance between how many developers organizations have and how many security practitioners we're having. That imbalance, the average is 1 to 50, and it's just keep growing. So it's not that we have some linear ratio. We have to enable our security practitioners with tools that are going to break this imbalance and give them exponential more power to help and remediate. And lastly, right, we're talking about cloud security talk track here. It's very important to know that obviously, as we all imagine, as we know for many years, the trend of running more and more applications in the cloud just keeps growing. So we see that 50% or more than the organization surveyed said that more than 70% of their workloads run in the cloud. So we see a lot of intersection between internally developed apps and obviously the cloud environment. So I think those numbers don't show us a very optimistic picture on where we're going, and this is why I think it's time to discuss some of the ways we can address those. And so this is why I think we can start discussing about the ASPM framework, or Application Security Posture Management. That's what this acronym stands for. Basically, it's a framework that is meant to help us address some of the challenges we've been seeing, and it's basically about providing us, a security practitioner, a way to tackle risk and risk points across our environment, whether it's in our custom code and internally developed apps, whether it's through hosted apps, IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, any of our applications that we're running, whether it's in the cloud, but also if we're still running some of them in our data centers and on-prem. So taking all of that together and providing us a framework that lets us aggregate, correlate, prioritize, investigate, orchestrate, and remediate. A lot of big words, and we'll kind of go through all of them and see how they help us. But the goal is to provide all of these in an automated way such that we can get to a point where, first of all, we want to be good to our peers and have happy developers, have them work well with the security. At the end of the day, we want to make sure we fix faster, right? We talked about how fast attackers actually exploit versus how slow the industry has been fixing. So one key metric is mean time to remediation. So being able to reduce that and fix faster, that's one big goal. And lastly, reduce the noise. I'm sure you all are familiar with it, but the sheer volume of risks and alerts and findings that we're getting is massive. And being able to address those in a way that's efficient for everybody is one of the goals of an ASPM. So what I want to do right now is kind of walk you through the framework, the 6 steps, share with you what you can expect of an ASPM solution to help you with, how it can be valuable for your teams, for your organization, and kind of share about what to expect of a good such solution. So let's start with the first step, aggregation. So as we talk about our cloud risk, as we talk about our application security risk, then I think one of the things that immediately pop up is that there's so many different vendors out there that can tackle a certain part of that problem. There's so many different vendors that would do a wonderful job at scanning that particular part of our environment or the other particular part. And as an industry, we've been obsessed with visibility, with more detections, with more view, and of course, every security practitioner knows that the first step is always visibility. And so we've gotten to the point where we have so many different vendors that give us that great visibility. And they're all very well equipped at solving a very specific vertical. They're spent years and years and gaining that experience on being a very good code scanner or being a very good container scanner or cloud infrastructure scanner. But at the end of the day, for us to provide all-around program for our organization, we have to leverage the best of breed of each of that set of solutions. So what we're seeing is that the amount of tools that every organization has is just growing. Each of them is very specialized at one specific part. And also the complexity of development of apps is just growing. So what can I expect of an ASPM tool to help me with is, first of all, unify and aggregate all those data points from all those different point solutions that I have, provide this elusive term of a single pane of glass, but being able to do that in a way that I can easily communicate to my peers, right? It's all about, when we work with our peers, with our developers, it's all about effective communication. So you want to be able to provide a clear and effective, simple single pane of glass of the overall risk. And what should you expect of a good ASPM? Then you want to have a good data scheme. You want to make sure that you still have the power to sift through the data, search, and not lose anything in this aggregation piece. And also, as we've mentioned, there's a lot of great vendors out there. A lot of them are doing very specialized, tailored detections for specialized areas, and you want to find a solution that can work with the industry and work well with the best-of-breed solutions. The next step is about correlation. So, as we've mentioned, it's not enough to just aggregate the data because there's just too much of it. Correlation is where we want to start making more sense out of the data that we have. And the reason that we need this is because, especially in the cloud environment, especially in the modern environment, the deployment processes are growing more and more complex, more and more sophisticated, and the different steps are very tightly connected to one another. Being able to view the security story as one, being able to connect between one side of the house with the other, being able to connect between what a developer is doing and what impact it has on my cloud environment is key to drive efficient remediation. And being able to just find that needle in the haystack out of those massive, massive backlogs of risks. And you know, I've been working with a lot of security teams, and sometimes the sheer volume is ridiculous. You start seeing millions and millions of those findings. Hundreds of thousands of them are deemed high risk. Thousands are critical. How do you even start to make sense out of it? And so being able to correlate all of that into one coherent story provides deduplication as first, which is key, right? We can't keep sending duplicative noise to our developers or engineers, and start to do that in a way that makes sense across different parts of the house, right? And so when we're looking for a good ASPM solution, we should expect for a tool that has deep understanding of how our software is being built, how our environment is being built. And thankfully, this is a Google conference and not a Microsoft conference, but we don't need another Excel spreadsheet, right? And what you should look for is a solution that's not only aggregating stuff to another spreadsheet, but also gives you smart insights, things that you couldn't have just gotten from putting everything in a spreadsheet. So this is correlation. The next step is prioritization. And I think as an industry, we all should be obsessed about this. And I think we should all ask more of the vendors that we're working with to do better in prioritization. But at the end of the day, there's just too many risks points, too many data points we need to fix, and nobody really knows what we should do first, right? One tool would tell you that they have a special score that they have. Another tool will have a different way to prioritize. But when I go to my developer and tell them, you gotta fix this, then should they fix this very high-risk vulnerability first? Or should they first fix this misconfiguration that they've created? Well, what's more important? And then we end up sending them 10 critical issues, and they don't know what to start with. And on the other side, you know, developers or engineers they're not security experts. It's not their job to know what to do first. It's our job. And so I think we definitely need to strive as an industry for better prioritization. And the way to do it is, of course, we want to take in the risk factors. And of course, we have the Mandiants of the world providing us great risk context. But we got to add more context on top of that really understands our business. Maybe we have an application that's critical to the business, and maybe we have an application that's just a test that some developer created. We don't want to treat those two the same, right? So being able to incorporate that context when we prioritize is key, and also being able to incorporate context across the different environments. If I have a problem in my code, if that code never runs anywhere, I don't really care. But if that code ends up running in my most precious crown jewel, then maybe I should care more. So being able to connect the dots and connect the two sides of the house is key for effective prioritization. So definitely, as we look for a good ASPM solution, when it comes to prioritization, we should definitely look for something that offers beyond your classic CVSS or your classic risk scores, and really brings in non-static metrics that understand your organization and not just a generic risk framework. And after we've prioritized, sometimes you might think that this is the end of the line. As security practitioners, we're done, right? We detected the issues. We've decided what's more important to fix first, and now we throw it over the fence to our counterparts to go figure it out. But I think one of the reasons that, the numbers we've seen at the beginning, one of the reasons that this is not really working is because we can't just stop there. We have to be better partners for our peers. We have to do more to help them understand how to fix. We have to remember that it's our job to take care of the risk of the organization, and it's not the job description of a developer to make sure that the organization is secure. So another step, which I think is highly impactful, is investigation. And what it means is that today, finding an issue is a lot easier than really understanding how to fix it. That's a whole other story that after we've detected, and how do we fix, that's a whole other process that is very time-consuming. And also, especially in the cloud, if we don't fix things at the core where they came from, we can just play whack-a-mole. We would fix them, but then tomorrow they go down, the machine comes up again, same problem. So being able to investigate and really get to the bottom of it is key to being able to actually fix and not just detect. So what should I expect of an ASPM solution to help me with? First of all, I should expect it to help me find the origin of the risk point and where they should be fixed. So if I have a misconfiguration in my cloud, or if I have a vulnerable workload, then where is that coming from? Who deployed it? What code did they use? Maybe it's a third-party vendor. Maybe I have a contractor creating it. Finding that root cause is key. And also, if we're going back to the topic of noise reduction, then once you find that core problem, then maybe that core problem is responsible for 100 different issues in your environment. Being able to group the findings back to the core helps you fix faster, because usually, especially in the cloud, things are very modular. So maybe one fix can impact 100 machines, and we don't have to chase 100 different fixes. And lastly, I think investigation is key because it helps us also identify ownership. I think one of the biggest problems that I'm seeing working with security teams is that we don't always know who owns each finding. We don't always know who to call, who to contact. And I don't know if you've experienced that, but I've seen emails, broad emails, just saying like, who knows about this machine, who owns that server? And that's not a great way to find ownership. So tying everything back to the core also helps us understand who should we contact. If it's a developer, then we can find the right person or the team or the director that we should engage with. And also you should look for, when you go for looking for an ASPM solution, you should expect for the tool to automate this investigation process as much as possible, right? We don't want to have to spend time as security practitioners chasing those leads, trying to thief through the massive amounts of data to find who created that issue and be required to do that again and again and again for every finding we want to fix. So automation is definitely key here. And I think that leads us very well to the next topic here, the orchestration. So that is a personal favorite of mine. Realistically speaking, orchestration is a pretty broad topic. But I think we did a a whiteboard exercise, and we wanted to kind of jot down all the steps that you would have to go through to actually remediate an issue. And some of them are very boring administrative work. You know, you gotta find the person, you gotta send an email, you gotta decide we should fix it or we don't. Maybe you gotta defer the fix to another date. Maybe there isn't a patch available yet, and so on and so on and so on. And it gets very complicated. There's so many, paths there. But at the end of the day, our security practitioners were trained to do other things. We shouldn't be wasting their time doing administrative work that can be completely automated. So I think the reason we need orchestration in this space is that the process of keeping track of the remediation, keeping track of the progress, understanding who owns what is extremely time-consuming. There's spreadsheets involved, there's emails involved, there's thousands of meetings that, just going over the content. And also there's many stakeholders that needs to be involved in this. You gotta engage them all the time. You gotta report back to the board, or report back to your executives. You gotta report to every director for every application development team or business department. So being able to automate that orchestration can just save a ton of time for us instead of having to spend our time doing administrative work. And what you can expect from a tool like that is that we would automate all those engagement protocols, all the ticketing processes, all the escalations, and basically even go along and get to this North Star of what we call self-service of the remediation and the reporting. Have people be served to them the data they need automatically, so they know what they need to fix, what they own, what risk is attributed to them. And then you can start tracking that and comparing between the different departments, how well they're doing in remediation, how well they're doing in fixing. And the last point here, which is really important for the success of such a program, is to really align with the structure of your business, right? You don't want a generic solution. You want a solution that can actually know what is the structure of your departments and who owns which application, and really work well with your ecosystem. So orchestration is really about saving time that is wasted on administrative work that's not utilizing the skills of our security professionals. And then lastly, in the 6 steps of this kind of framework is the remediation phase. And I think one key point that is pretty obvious when you say it, but I think there's a lot of us that haven't spent the time really kind of looking deep into that, is that until we haven't remediated the issue, then basically we haven't made any impact on the business, right? We've done a great job detecting, we've done a great job prioritizing, we've done a great job investigating, but all of that is in vain if we haven't actually fixed the issue, because from the attacker perspective, it doesn't matter if we've spent all that time sending those emails or prioritizing those issues. If the risk is still there, we're still exposed to a breach. So making sure we get to that finish line of actually remediating is so important, and we sometimes overlook that particular part. And so I think one key thing to remember is that our counterparts that actually perform the remediation, the engineers, the developers, the IT folks, they're not security practitioners and they struggle with understanding how to fix. Maybe for us, it's very clear that this vulnerability is crucial, it is critical to the business, but the developers and the engineers, they don't know that, and frankly, they don't really care. So it's our job to help them understand, first of all, how to fix. So that can be done by providing guidance and providing code fixes even, going as far as providing the actual code fixes directly in their environment. And obviously now, with the rise of generative AI, I'm sure you've all heard many talks today that mention AI, and I'm 25 minutes in and that's the first time I've said AI. But really, thinking about it, AI, generative AI, and LLMs, what they're great at is exactly this, providing textual guidance, providing code fixes. This is really where they excel, right? So we are at an era where we're lucky enough to have the technology that should streamline this. Nobody should ever go searching for what patch to implement or what is the code fix that would fix my vulnerability. You should just be served that answer right away. So this is what you can expect from a solution like an ASPM, to provide that guidance, to provide those code fixes, and to automate as much as possible. And obviously, developers, engineers, they don't want to live and work in security tools. They have their own workflows. So being good peers and being integrated with the way that they work, with their ticketing systems, with their IDEs, with their code repositories, being able to create as much as possible an experience that is very similar to their day-to-day. It is obviously, as a security practitioner, it's us, extending above and beyond to get that remediation done. But anything that can help us really reduce the risk should be implemented, especially if it's easy and automated. And lastly, I think, and this is very important, remediation guidance has to include the context of your environment, right? I mean, just telling you, oh, just go update the package to a newer version, that's not very effective remediation guidance. It has to include your specific environment. It has to understand your specific use case, because maybe for you, updating that package is not possible. Maybe this is a crucial production system and it cannot be have a downtime right now. We need to do it later. So you might be seeing some tools providing generic, guidance of like, go patch this. But I think you should ask and demand your vendors to provide a lot more than that. They should provide guidance that actually is usable by your developers, by your engineers. So this is the remediation step. And I think before we kind of wrap it up and kind of give you a summary, I think let's do a one case study of how it all plays together. We've seen those 6 steps of the framework. I think just kind of walking through the day in the life of, let's take Alice, our security engineer that needs to kind of fix the issue. Let's walk through the different steps and see why it is so complicated today and why we can help her a lot. So let's say we have a cloud security tool in our environment that scans our, let's say we are using GCP. And so that tool found a vulnerability in some workload. Let's say it's a container or a machine, doesn't really matter. And that's where our day starts in the morning, right? The first thing is that, well, a container is so low-level concept, or a machine is such a low-level concept, it doesn't mean much to my organization. First thing I need to understand, well, what application does this support? This machine that got vulnerability in it, this container, what application? Is it an important business application? I need to prioritize the issue based on the business context. Maybe it's just a test environment. Maybe it's just some developers testing some stuff. Or maybe this is the most important business application. Maybe our most crucial workflow and business logic goes through that. So I have to understand what application it supports and what is the priority of that. Then, all of a sudden, Alice sees that also we have a software composition analysis tool in our organization that is scanning our code very far away, but alerting on the same vulnerability. So is it the same problem? Is it a different problem? We have to start, Alice has to start to correlate the code findings with that cloud issue. She has to start figuring out whether it's the same problem. Maybe it's very similar, but not exactly the same. Maybe that code that the code scanning tool scanned then later became the cloud workload that we're seeing vulnerable right now. And then maybe we also have an external attack surface management tool that's kind of testing the perimeter of our organization, trying to kind of exploit things from the outside. And that also found the same vulnerability by engaging from the public internet. So is it the same problem? Is it a different problem? Should Alice go and ask her developers to fix 3 different things or just 1? So now we have to map back the risk to the exact location that in the code that actually created all these problems. Maybe they're all the same, so Alice is doing the correlation, understands that all of these are actually the same problem, and then she has to find where this needs to be fixed. Who owns this? Should I call that team or the other team? Who should I ping and who should I send a ticket to fix this? So Alice goes and finds the owner of the risk. Maybe she sends a couple of emails. Then she has to engage with that person. Again, maybe set up a meeting, maybe has to send another email, a spreadsheet. Maybe there's multiple teams involved because there's the platform team, and then there's the DevOps team, and then there's the Cloud Excellence team. And so after she's engaged with all of them, she needs to provide them with clear guidance on what they need to do. Why should they fix it? After she's done all of that, she has to follow up with the particular developer. When are they fixing it? Is it in this sprint? Is it in the next sprint? And has to keep tracking on the progress. And lastly, once it's finally remediated, she has to report on it, track it, see the trends over time. and make sure that the risk is completely removed from the environment. So this kind of process, obviously, many different steps, just to kind of emphasize why it is such a complicated problem today. And on average, it can take, with teams that we're seeing, around 30 days just to do all those back and forth emails, investigations. And what you should expect of an ASPM solution is really to run through all of this automatically and be done with it within 10 minutes, right? So this, I think, is the biggest advantage you should expect. And to kind of wrap it all up and give you the quick crash course on ASPM, I hope that this was, even though you've heard about ASPM before, I hope this was helpful to really understand what is this new category, should you be interested in it or not. So to kind of summarize it all, I think first point is that the security of proprietary apps or internally developed apps has become more and more complex, especially in the cloud, especially in the more modern era that we're living in right now. And as we've seen with all those statistics and those numbers that I've shared earlier, apparently the current processes and technologies do not meet the need to really keep us secure. We've seen how many organizations are breached and how long it takes to fix. So something's not working properly. And so we've seen how an ASPM solution can provide us with a comprehensive way to manage all of our security risks, whether it's code, cloud, infrastructure, and so on, and do that in a way that we can actually take action, and do that for our internally developed apps, externally, contractors, third parties, do it all in one way. And at the end of the day, it's a really big problem space. There's a lot of vendors, there's a lot of tools out there that can help us solve a part of the problem, and there's not going to be one single tool that's going to solve everything, because it all requires very specialized experience. So we should expect to see quite a lot of vendors helping us with a section of our problem, but we should try and leverage an ASPM solution to help us manage the entire portfolio in a way that we can actually operationalize and reduce the risk. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this was enlightening about what an ASPM should be. If you have any more questions, feel free to either ask me after this talk or reach out and connect later. And thank you very much for attending.